Hello, hello, friends, and welcome to the 14th episode of Dust James' weekly assault on U.S. empire. Revolutionary, anti imperialist, working class analysis. Hope you're doing well today. Hope those around you are doing well. Hope you have enough in these trying times. Hello, space communists. Thanks for joining us. I'm doing well. I'm on my 1 day off from driving trucks over the road. My lovely mobile home in rural North Carolina. I hope you and yours and your family are doing well. Um, Follow the guidelines. Stay inside. Survive. Protect yourself. Wash your hands. Come together. I like something that Matt Cedillo says on his lives. Recommend his book of poetry. Physical space. I'm probably saying it wrong, but essentially, physical distancing, not social distancing. All right, I'm just going to get right into it today. As you could see on, if you saw it on my main page, um, well, if you saw it on Facebook, if you saw me share this on Facebook and you're here via Facebook, subscribe to this YouTube, hit the notification button. That way, if you want to see me as soon as I go on, you're more likely to see me as soon as you go on. I know I'm trying to do this Saturday mornings. I know I'm a little bit later to this week. It's kind of hard. I don't know what time I'm getting home Friday. I don't know what business I got to take care of Friday. It's hard to set a date. It's hard to set a time. It's been anywhere from about 11 o'clock to as late as 2 o'clock today on Saturday morning. I'm continuing to do it like that. So if you saw it on my Facebook page, today's topic is out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses, from the community, not to the community. Democratic centralism, not bourgeois democracy. So I've gone over my story a bunch of times. I was born in rural upstate New York. There ain't when someone in the South says New York, or most places in the country, they think New York City. That's not the case with rural upstate New York and the Finger Lakes region around there. There's nothing. Honestly, there's not much up there but hills, dairy farms, hay fields. And I talked about how NAFTA, which put Mexican workers and Mexican farmers out of business down there, it also did its job on rural small family farms. It hit them as well, and it helped corporatize the agricultural industry, which helped destroy many towns, many local economies towns, or many local towns economy. I'll get it right. It was pushed down to North Carolina when I was 5 years old, and I grew up in rural North Carolina, um, and in poverty. At one point, there was 8 of us in a two-bedroom trailer on a long mile-long dirt road. I tried to escape my family situation. I I spent a lot of time in the undocumented community. Had a lot of friends, and the recent Mexican immigrants mostly worked in factories where the minority of folks were white. Because of institutional racism, people of color You can also see it as oppressed nations are kept down in the lowest jobs. And being a worker, I was the minority as a white person in these folks and this community. And I'm kind of the demographic that the KKK wants to organize, or the racists who want to use poverty to spread race hatred. But that's not the solution. The solution is solidarity. As Huey P. Newton of the Black Panthers said, solidarity, not black capitalism. So that's kind of my story and where I come from. I'm no nonsense, working class, from the people. I don't really like sarcasm. I'm in this. I take the little bit of time I have in my days and my day off to try to change the conditions for my community, try to raise people out of poverty, educate myself, try to educate folks around me. So what do I mean when I say out of the movement to the masses? Well, what's the movement? The movement is the few, honestly, it's the few left folks who go to leftist rallies. And that's kind of the movement. And it's disassociated and alienated from the masses of the working class. And this has a lot to do with the material conditions. At one point, there was a large labor aristocracy in the United States, and that's changing, especially with the 2008 recession and now with the current recession or depression. It's too late to tell. It's too early to tell. But the movement has been controlled by forces within the Democratic Party for a long time. It's hard to go in movement spaces and find organizations that aren't somehow tied to the Democratic Party. MoveOn.org is one of the worst, at least when I was organizing. If you look, like the Women's March, which was against Trump, was probably more imperialist than the average working person, who many folks, even those who voted for Trump, Trump came off as an American first isolationist, and with almost posturing towards anti-war. And Obama did the same thing. Obama came off almost as a peace candidate. He was the one who was against the Iraq war. He was the one replacing Bush. I think the American people are tired of these wars. And a call to peace is a call to the masses. We're tired of dying in these wars. We're tired of seeing our money go to these wars. We need to get the non-voters. We need to get your neighbors. We need to get the folks in the community. We need folks in the Chicano community, folks in the black community, the African American or black community. We need to organize around Marxism. I recommend this book, Wage, Labor, Capital. It's not as hard as Capital. Peace, Land and Bread, and Avocado Toast. I like it, Space Communist. I recommend this book. Start a study group amongst your neighbors, Wage, Labor, and Capital. I read a section on one of my earlier lives, and if you work on the line in the factory, you can understand this book pretty easily. So out of the movement to the masses. And if you want to go to the masses, you got to stop doing that bourgeois crap that alienates workers. Workers in general, of whatever community you're in. Like constantly attacking folks for the way you are, attacking folks for eating meat, attacking folks for going to church. attacking folks for the positive elements of patriotism they may have. You don't get to decide how people are going to be. You're not the most enlightened person out there. Your job as a revolutionary and an organizer is to get what people already are wanting, what people are already doing. Look at those positive aspects and the broader masses that we can mobilize around. And I think some of the best examples of this is within the Black nationalist and Chicano nationalist movement. The Black Panthers and the Breakfast Program, which actually helped me get breakfast as a white person. I also bring that up, that I gladly take leadership from people in the oppressed community who are hit the most hard. And it's about strength. It's about organizing and about building power, getting many masses. It ain't about your ego. It's not about how good you can write, you know. I mean, if that helps the movement, if you can develop a good speech and good writing skills that applies to the masses, that's good. But if it's not about writing for writing's sake, art for art's sake, theory for theory's sake. This has a goal, and the goal is power, and the goal is changing the conditions for the better of the working class. And I'm sorry, but having the same 15, 20 people, 30 people, maybe 100 people in your town go out for the same issues against the Republicans when the Republicans in office, largely quiet when the Democrats are in office, isn't changing anything. So I talked about in my story, a lot of the folks around me were migrants. There was a big boom in North Carolina, kind of an economic boom. It was kind of laissez-faire. A lot of it was about lowering wages. As they were moving jobs over to China and Mexico, they were moving jobs from the unionized North to the ununionized South, where there was long social and institutional forms and legacies that keep workers down, right to work laws, etc., going back to slavery, Jim Crow, segregation. It was kind of a boom in the South when I came down here. A lot of the Mexican immigrants that I worked with, neighbors and friends, in the same factories, a lot of them don't have documents. A lot of them are pushed here by U.S. imperialism, destroyed. This is U.S. imperialism, NAFTA, is destroying rural communities, the economy in rural communities in the United States. It destroyed the rural communities in southern Mexico, and it destroys the standard of living of people in Latin America. And folks come here undocumented because of U.S. imperialism. So on the line next to me, white worker in the United States has the same enemy, and I'm there and being exploited by the same people as the undocumented worker next to me. Only they have less rights than I do. And the fact they got less rights makes it less hard for me to get more rights. And the collective is total. The answer is solidarity. An injury to one is an injury to all. As long as folks don't have the same rights we do, we'll never have rights. Unite and fight is the saying. I think 11 years ago, I was in college and doing my activism, and there's this positive group in North Carolina called the Pilgrimage for Peace and Justice. And they go around and they point out some of the injustices, largely the faith community, universalists, etc. They go around North Carolina. They do positive work usually in the spring. 11 years ago, one of their marches, they were doing their march during Holy Week, happened to coincide with a racist reactionary demonstration. in Graham County, North Carolina, where the sheriff had implemented 287G, and the local law enforcement facility was being used by the feds. And racist reactionary sentiments were pushing people out with signs, and the sign said, "I sleep at night," because the sheriff locks people up. And there's a good picture of me walking by there, and it was kind of a religious theme, and it was a positive group, Pilgrimage for Justice and Peace in North Carolina, looking at them, good group. And I had a cross, and towards the camera, I think the press camera, whatever camera it was, someone taking a picture, I had a cross that said "Change Trade." It said "Cambio Negocio," or "Change NAFTA." Held that to, and the other side, I had another cross. And on that cross, I had a poster board covering it. And I think on one side it said, "You workers, unite in faith for better conditions for us all." And I held that up over the reactionaries. As I walked by, and they're jeering and spitting on me and what have you. And we rolled on down around the back, and we had a woman dressed up as the Statue of Liberty get arrested. The same facility where the undocumented workers were being kept. I think somehow that got on the news. It got on the news in the Spanish press. It got on the news in the regular press. And the next day, I think that made front cover of the Chapel Hill newspaper. I'm not sure if the student newspaper or another one. The next day, there was a reactionary that came to Chapel Hill, and there was a riot with my front page on the paper. It's one of my better times. I'll talk about some of the positive stuff I've done and for the reasons I've done it. And maybe inspire other folks to do similar things. So out of the movement to the masses. You want to get to the masses, you got to appeal to their better sentiments. You can't mandate how they are. You can't mandate how they eat. You can't mandate what they say. Build power. I don't think the 1930s general strikes made everyone there, kicked anybody out who said anything minorly offensive or alienate anyone that went over there. I don't think they made the people who partook the Communist Party, who mobilized these general strikes in the 30s, would do a history lesson on every single person that came out in mass of the factories that shut down the economy to demand the rights of workers and the reason why we have as good as we have today. The little bit of labor laws we do have are largely because of the Communist Party of the United States, socialist anarchist organizers, and competition with an alternative economic system, the Soviet Union, which has helped build up, and Stalin inspired the people to build up and form, fight off the Nazis, and invent, and later on invent space travel. Who, up into the fall of the Soviet Union, there was little to no homelessness. There was little to no drug issues. Prostitution wasn't rampant like it is in capitalist countries in the third world and the United States. They were able to maintain that up until the 90s. That's a story, and we ain't going to dictate exactly how Stalin run it. We're not going to dictate exactly how. Maybe it was good things, there was bad things about it, but looking at it from a material perspective, a scientific socialist perspective, we look at the conditions of the working class. And when we teach Marxism to our neighbors, folks come to us, how are we going to make this better? Hey, Dustin, well, what are you going to do? What are you doing to make things better? I'm like, I'm reading this right here. This right here is a guide. It'll help us out. Okay, let me read some of that. And they read it. And I say, just like I did in my introduction. I talked about where I come from and why, and the reasons and the folks around me and the reason they were there from a scientific understanding, a scientific socialist perspective. Scientific socialism. Also, this book, straightforward, to the point, simple language, Comrade Stalin summarizes the foundations of Leninism, the Marxism in the time, in the era of imperialism. Apply the scientific socialism to your own life. Ask your neighbors, what are you facing in the factory? What are you facing in your neighborhood? Why are you facing it? Here's the answer. This is how you can understand this. It's not because there's a Democrat in the office. It's not because there's a Republican in the office. It's because of the global economic system of imperialism. Imperialism, also known as monopoly capitalism, the final stage of capitalism. There's a lot of folks like to be anti-religious, and I think there's a lot of problems in religion in the United States. Religion has been twisted from its foundation to build empires. The Catholic Church used Christianity and Catholicism to destroy Latin America, and it's been used to preach to slaves in the United States, to work hard and obey their masters. But also, there's positive elements of it. If you look at Sermon on the Mount, the meek shall inherit the earth. Know someone by their fruits. Know something by their fruits. That saying in the Gospels, know something by their fruits, is scientific socialism. There's good and there's bad in religion. There's positive in it. So if you go to your neighbor who's religious, tell them, know something by their fruits. So I vote Democrat or I vote Republican. That's bourgeois democracy. That's drama. Say this: the poor stay poor, and the wars never stop. No matter who we vote for, because they're the same group of folks. We know them by their fruits. We know them by their war. We know them by the poverty they cause. This is scientific socialism. So your neighbor, your religious neighbor, already supports scientific socialism, and they don't even know about it. And even if something is horrible as U.S. patriotism, U.S. nationalism, jingoism, this blind, if you leave it or love it, if you don't like the war, if you don't like the troops, stand in front of them, even that stupid blind notion, there's something positive. I think there's something positive behind it. And look at Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again." Well, the again is a little racist because it's racism, appeal to racism, for racism in this racist country. But take off the again, make America great. I think there's actually a lot of optimism. If you look on the left, there's a lot of pessimism. Within Trump supporters, there's optimism. I think optimism is a good thing. And that's the idea, we can make this country better. But we shouldn't make it to try to go back to some kind of 1950s thing where white workers had it slightly better than they do now. We should make it a country free of racial oppression, free of national oppression, free of exploitation of man by man. And you can apply to some positive aspects of patriotism, like the idea that you can selfishly, so when they send working folks over to die in these wars to help U.S. imperialism, they apply to their better notions and manipulating them into working against their own interests. They say, serve your country, work for your country. And we do need to serve our community. serve our communities, serve our oppressed nations, serve our class, and get a government that's doing that. As Caleb Mopping says, we need a government of action that will fight for working families. And that takes selfless service and sacrifice. Elements that more reactionary elements and the American people claim they support, which we can use to mobilize and organize people into doing. If we look at positive movements in the world, like what's going on in China, I recommend everyone read this book, Xi Jinping, The Governments of China. They have adopted market elements to have some of the experimental ability that and ways and to develop the economy that capitalism has done, but forming it and framing it in a way that's leading us forward into a better world of socialism. And that's what they say. They're Marxist-Leninist. They come together. They talk about uniting all of the racial identities in China and building a moderate, prosperous society and working towards socialism. And when they do that, and how they've organized and maintained their power, they have appealed to religious elements in their society. Taoism, Chinese Taoism, is the elements in that which are unique to Chinese culture are being implemented by the government to win support from the people. And this is democratic socialism. Bourgeois democracy has largely been this team, that team says this, a drama back and forth, while the bourgeois capitalists, monopoly capitalists, do whatever they want to us. Democratic socialism is where the material needs, the sentiments of the people are taken into consideration, and the government centrally planned in a way that has the efficiency to march forward in history and bring about better conditions in the working class. And this is how the Chinese government has been able to lift 10 million people out of poverty, be the leader in green energy. So when I say out of the movement to the masses, based on democratic centralism. Yes, exactly. Socialist countries, space communists mentioned. China's becoming the geopolitical leader of the world. They've come out on top of the COVID-19 is over. Very true, because they were ready. And they had a better, more efficient system. It's scientific socialism. It is the progress of history. One system overcoming another. Because the old system is weak. Hunter-gatherings being replaced by slave societies being replaced by feudalism to capitalism to socialism eventually to communism. Each one of those pre-existing societies did its turn in developing history, but it is weak. And a new one comes over and takes over, and a thesis, an antithesis. The antithesis overtakes. The thesis becomes the new mode of production. China is pushing the world towards socialism by implementing socialist infrastructure, becoming stronger than the US, and eventually they are overtaking the economy of the United States. And they're doing that by building power, applying to the sentiments of the people, raising the conditions, and applying to the sentiments like Taoism. In the United States, there's positive groups doing this. Like I mentioned, the Universalists appeal to people's positive religious sentiments. Pilgrimage for Justice and Peace here in North Carolina. Also, Reverend Barber, who is tied to the Democratic Party, but is using positive aspects of Christianity to push people to progressivism and socialism, progressivism mostly. Socialism requires us to take over the means of production, which Reverend Barber is not pushing for, and people he supported or have come talk with him like Bernie Sanders are not. But I think we could do the same thing as Reverend Barber's doing, and some of the more progressive forces appeal to religion. Positive religious sentiments to organize for revolutionary outcomes. I'm going to hit on a subject is mostly a left book kind of subject. I'm going to talk about Trotskyism. So, when I first got involved in politics, it was first within the anti-war movement. And in forces within the anti-war movement and people I identified with, I had trouble identifying with a lot of the groups on my campus. People middle class, upper middle class. First, I went to a private school, Guilford College, because of the Quaker background, and I respected the Quakers. And that private school won't working out for me. And then I later went on to UNCG, more of a public school. And in that public school, there was a group called ISO, International Socialist Organization. And that group essentially was a book club that would sell Trotskyist authors who were tied in with the academic community. They'd sell their books, and maybe they would do one gender issue, not even an anti-war or a union protest, but they would go to one gendered issue protest a year, sell and read books in the setting of the university. I couldn't stand them people. I'm going to be honest, working class, I was ready to get stuff done, go out. I found people in the labor community, in the civil rights community, outside of the campus. And it was there with with positive forces in the community that I learned about Stalin, Marxist Leninism, and this book, and read this book here, J.V. Stalin's The Foundations of Leninism. I'm going to read, later on when I came from the working class and was trying to organize students out to some of the stuff, and I was coming in contact with Trotskyites. I read this here to understand, which is M.J. Olgan, which also wrote a really good book called Why Communism. Why Communism by Olgan is a straight up, no nonsense, to the people. This is why you need socialism. This is why you need communism. Call to action. Like right in the beginning of Why Communism, he goes, which I would read. Honestly, maybe you can get study groups around Olgan's Why Communism. In the first paragraph or section, it says, hey, you worked at this factory for a long time. You were happy that the boss gave you opportunity to work. You believe the boss. You made a little bit of a living for yourself. You don't really got a savings, but you got a place to live and you raise your family. And then all of a sudden, the company decides to kick you out, have you starve. Back before the communist organizers in the 30s, there won't none of this Social Security, unemployment stuff that was fought for that we have now. There won't none of it. So you get kicked out of a job. Your options was to starve. And he took that moment of being unemployed and kicked out on the street to say, we need a new system. Why Communism by Olgan. I recommend it. Same author wrote this. Trotskyism, counter-revolutionary in disguise. And what it says in this book goes right along with my experience with Trotskyists. And I'm going to read the very last paragraph, which I quote. Anytime I get an online discussion or someone, I post this link and I copy and paste the last paragraph. And I'm going to read that paragraph today. If I can find it. Trotskyism does not sink roots into the masses of the proletariat, but its danger for the Communist Party, and particularly for these petty bourgeois intellectuals who are moving towards the Communist Party in capitalist countries, must not be underestimated. It is the petty bourgeois, that is, through Trotskyism, trying to disorganize and demoralize the revolutionary forces that are mobilizing against capitalism. The petty bourgeois element, says Lenin, surrounded the proletariat on all sides. They saturate it. They demoralize it. They continually make it relapse into petty bourgeois spinelessness, disruption, individualism, transition from enthusiasm to dismay. This is true about the capitalist countries. No less, it was true about the Soviet Republic in 1920. The petty bourgeois is surrounding the proletariat on every side. Trotskyism is being continually regenerated as the expression of a particular brand of counter-revolution. It is only natural that the intellectuals hailing from the petty bourgeoisie should be particularly exposed to the dangers of Trotskyism. The lot of the intellectuals in the present crisis is far from inevitable. Hundreds of thousands have been thrown out of work. Scientific, scientific, educational, and cultural activities have been crippled. The intellectual youth have almost no hope of getting work that would enable it to develop its talents and to lead to a comfortable existence. The intellectuals are becoming radicalized. But being petty bourgeoisie, many of them have an aversion for the Communist Party, for its theory and practice. Here, Trotskyism comes in handy. It gives the intellectuals this kind a way out. It makes it possible for them to pose as communists without participating in the class struggle. It gives them the opportunity to pose as critics of the Communist Party from the left and thus satisfy their desire to appear, quote, radical, unquote. It gives them a platform from which to fight the Communist Party and thus satisfy their petty bourgeois inclinations without at the same time appearing reactionary. It supplies them with material for the mounting of phrases against Lenin and Stalin and the Communist International and the World Revolution, while sticking deeply in the petty bourgeois mud. It must then believe they are communist, while it caters to all their petty bourgeois hatreds for the proletarian discipline and proletarian straightforward revolutionary action. And this is precisely why Trotskyism must be branded as an enemy of the working class, why Trotskyism should be shunned by anyone who has sympathy for the revolutionary movement of the exploited and the oppressed the world over. It must be the supreme task of the toilers in every country to build the Communist Party as section of the Communist International and to follow its line of struggle against capitalism and for the Soviet Union and for the Soviet system. That goes. This was written in. I didn't realize how current this was going to be. 1935, in the midst of the Great Depression, as they were having trouble there, trouble with Trotskyites, and the Communist Party was the one that was mobilizing unemployment councils, and the Communist Party, aligned with the Soviet Union, was the one that was pushing for to push Roosevelt to have Social Security, and what we do have as much as we have to this day. Now, as we go through a current crisis, we face a similar crisis. We must avoid the enemy of Trotskyism, with its circles tied to the academia, tied to the petty bourgeoisie, and which get out of the movement to the masses and speak in terms the masses can understand. Get straightforward working class analysis. How are you going to go to a worker and be like, hey, man, I know you got it bad right now. I know you got it bad right now, and things are fucked up. The solution is socialism. But not that socialism, not that scary socialism that's like Stalin or Mao, not that socialism. A new, better kind of socialism that only we have understand, that only we are doing. And all those folks who tried socialism a different way, they're not so good. You got to come follow our type of socialism. Workers like, well, how is this socialism going to help me and my family? How is this socialism going to advance my conditions? A Trotskyite will be like, it will, just trust me. A scientific socialist, not the right on Space Cut, not a socialism that actually worked. A scientific socialist can point to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union industrialized, took the most backward country in Europe, turned it into a superpower within a matter of a few decades, organizing the economy in a rational way. Unprecedented industrial growth, rising people from the level of peasants or below peasants into the modern world. Stalin did that. Mao. First, Mao kicked out the reactionary, the Japanese, overtook the bourgeois forces. And then later on, forces like Deng Xiaoping, Xi Jinping have been making China grow 3 times the rate of the United States for the last 30 years, raising millions, tens of millions of people out of poverty. This is why the scientific socialist, Marxist-Leninist perspective can go directly to the workers, and the bourgeois, Trotskyite, intellectual counter-revolution will get you nowhere. I'm going to read from Stalin's The Foundations of Leninism, the very last chapter. We're trying to develop socialism with American characteristics. I'm going to take, before I get into that section, let me read. I love people getting on here. I want people to participate. Let's make this a discussion. Love the comments. Share this out with your friends. Comment. You put a comment, I'll read your comment. Until I get the whole damn thing full of comments where I can't ever read it, and I'm hoping that comes. I'll read comments. You put a comment, I'll read it. Right here from KJ Mack. Quite a few anti-USSR and such socialists tend to analyze the class character of statements they hear about socialist countries and tend to believe bourgeois information without investigation. Or at least that's what I've noticed. Very correct. Very correct. Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone wrote an article about how a socialist conference funded by ISO and other Trotskyist forces, in their damn headline was anti-Chavismo, like they're against Venezuela, no imperialism, but socialism. And at that socialist conference, Max Blumenthal thought out that the Trotskyites invited forces from the National Endowment for Democracy, a known CIA group, as an expert to talk about anti-imperialist countries. They had, not only do they repeat and tend to believe the bourgeois lies, they straight up invited the CIA into their conference to talk as experts. And it's not like some downfall of Trotskyism. This is the essence of the Trotskyist message. I mean, there is. It's complicated. It's complicated. I think as a trend, what Olgin said it's counter-revolutionary as a movement, as a whole. But there are individuals within that who've been led to that in the absence of a strong scientific socialist party and mass organization and mobilization. We're having forces that should be coming to us. Working class forces are going into reactionaryism, are going into Nazism, and going into Trotskyism. One of those positive forces, Caleb Maupin debated a guy, Al Suarez, Peruvian American guy who was involved with Occupy and I think he actually supports Venezuelan government and Maduro. So I mean, I think there is positive forces that are attracted to them, and I think the solution is we're not trying. Our primary goal is to get to the masses. We're not. I mean, uniting the left is not as important and doesn't have nearly the potential of getting to the working class and building working class organizations. But the few working class forces and oppressed nationalist forces that have been won to the Trotskyite movement, we need to build bigger, better organizations and win those forces over to our camp. All right. I think that's going to do it for my introduction. Out of the movement to the masses. Talked a little. Oh, before I read KJ Mac. Thank you for the comments. I was going to read from the Foundations of Leninism, and the topic of this introduction is out of the movement to the masses. We are trying to build socialism, just like the Chinese have developed socialism with Chinese characteristics. We need to develop socialism with American characteristics, applying to people's better notions within Christianity, applying to people's better notions within patriotism, and the giving nature of people, just applying to and going to where people are, thinking about the conditions they have, the ideas of what they have, using that to organize for anti-imperialist, straightforward mass organizations to help improve the conditions of the working class and build maybe a vanguard that can bring out and carry out revolution. Hopefully through peaceful means, but the oppressor is the one who decides what ultimately happens. Not seeking out violence, but having it pushed on us if necessary. So I'm going to read this. You know that Stalin was a fan of some of the elements in the United States. He, in his very last chapter in this book, KJ Max, self-defensive revolutionary activity rather than left adventures and propaganda of the dead. Right on, exactly, precisely. So Stalin, in his last chapter of his great book, which I am reading, which I am dictating, which I should have, I have the introduction, I have chapter 1, I have chapter 2 up on this YouTube channel in a playlist, J.V. Stalin, The Foundations of Leninism. In the very last chapter, very small chapter called Style and Work, Stalin praises positive aspects of the United States, which we can use to build socialism. They actually used some American characteristics to build socialism in the USSR. So I'll read. Style and work. I am not referring to literary style. What I have in mind is style and work, the specific and particular feature and the practice of Leninism, which creates the special type of Leninist worker. Leninism is a school of theory and practice which trains a specific type of party and state worker, creates a special Leninist style and work. What are the characteristic features of the style? What are its particularities? A. Russian revolutionary sweep, and B. American efficiency. The style of Leninism consists in combining these two specific features in party and state work: Russian revolutionary sweep and an antidote to inertia, routine, conservationism, mental stagnation, and Slavish submission to ancient traditions. Russian revolutionary sweep is the life giving force which stimulates thought, impels things forward, breaks the past, and opens up perspectives. Without it, no progress is possible. But revolution, but Russian revolutionary sweep has every chance of degenerating and practice into empty revolutionary Manolivism if it is not combined with American efficiency in works. Examples of this degeneration are only too numerous. Who does not know the disease of revolutionary scheme concocting and revolutionary plan drafting, which springs from the belief and the power of degrees to arrange everything and remake everything? A Russian writer, I. Ehrenberg, and his story, the Perfect Communist Man, has portrayed the type of a Bolshevik afflicted with this disease, who set himself the task of finding a formula for the ideally perfect man and became submerged in his work. The story contains a great exaggeration, but it certainly gives a correct likeness of the disease, but not one, I think, has so ruthlessly and bitterly ridiculed those afflicted with disease as Lenin. And Lenin stigmatized this morbid belief and concocting schemes and turning out degrees as communist vainglory. Communist vainglory, says Lenin, means a man who is a member of the Communist Party and is not yet purged from it images that he can solve all his problems by issuing communist decrees. Lenin usually contrasted hollow revolutionary phrasemongering with plain, everyday work, thus emphasizing that revolutionary scheme concocting is repugnant to the spirit and the letter of true Leninism. Fewer pompous phrases, more plain. Fewer pompous phrases, more plain, everyday work, says Lenin. Less political fireworks and more attention to the simplest vital facts of communist construction. American efficiency, on the other hand, is an antidote to revolutionary monolism and fantastic scheme concocting. American efficiency is the indomitable force which never knows nor recognizes obstacles, which is businesslike perseverance brushes aside all obstacles, which continues at a task once started until it is finished, even if it is a minor task and without which serious constructive work is inconceivable. But American efficiency has every chance of degenerating the narrow, unprincipled practicism if it is not combined with Russian revolutionary sweep. Who has not heard of that disease of narrow empiricism and unprincipled practicism, which has not infrequently caused certain, quote, Bolsheviks, unquote, to degenerate and to abandon the cause of the revolution? We find a reflection of this particular disease in a story by P. Plinkin entitled The Barren Year, which depicts types of Russian, quote, Bolsheviks, unquote, of strong will and practical determination, who function with very energetically, but without vision, without knowing what it is all about, and who therefore stay from the path of revolutionary work. No one has ridiculed this disease of practicalism so incisively as Lenin. He branded it as, quote, narrow-minded empiricism, unquote, and, quote, brainless practicalism, unquote. He usually contrasted with vital revolutionary work and the necessity of having a revolutionary perspective in all daily activities, thus emphasizing that this unprincipled practicism is repugnant to true Leninism as, quote, revolutionary, unquote, scheme concocting. The combination of Russian revolutionary sweep and American efficiency is the essence of Leninism in party and state work. This combination alone produces the finished type of Leninist work, the style of Leninism in work. In the song, in the U.S. translation of the anthem of the Soviet Union, that the famous American communist civil rights leader Paul Robeson sings. There's a line in there. And it goes, Stalin, with faith in the people, inspired us to build up the land that we love. Little did you know. When I first started to understand imperialism, I had a backlash. I applauded people burning the American flag. Because I was so angry of what everything I told was a lie. And I've later come to see that we can use the positive elements of patriotism. Maybe we shouldn't come off of that. That's just alienating. We can't tell workers how to be. We should look at their positive elements. So I've moved past that. But I used to, at my 4th of July celebrations, I would play that song sung by Paul Robeson with that quote about Stalin in it at my 4th of July demonstrations. Little did I know that Stalin was inspired by the efficiency of the American worker in that action, in the build-up, in the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of hope for organizing the working class in the United States to bring about a new future. This is turning out better than I thought it would. I was a little worried about planning today. I think when I get on subjects, I can really get into. So I think that's going to do it for the introduction. I'm gonna go. I don't have a lot of current events. I'm already over an hour. Usually this don't go more than an hour. I'm going to talk about a few current events, then go to my conclusion. Keep my format. 3-step process: introduction, current events, conclusion. I stick to that format. So a lot of workers got their stimulus check. And Donald Trump made it sure that anyone receiving a physical check had his name signed on the thing. This vain, egotistical, self-centered, racist demagogue, Donald Trump, in times of a crisis, he delayed money going to working people to make sure his name was on that check. And I got a response for that. Well, first up, they unnecessarily tax working people. And the money that we're getting back is our own damn taxes taken from us in the first place. And next up, even if they are giving us funds, it's not because they care about us. It's not because they care if we stop. It's not if they care if we suffer. You read Marxist Wage, Labor, and Capital. They need to maintain us as a class of workers, maintain even a reserve class of workers to keep their machines going. So this is why the checks went out. They don't, if mass people were kicked out on the streets, starved, this would create all kinds of issues. And then when the economy does open back up and they do need us, we wouldn't be in a position where we could work. So they're just trying to maintain us just enough so we can go back to work and open up the factories. And it is shown over and over again. This administration has put the profits of the medical industrial complex above the needs and the material conditions of the worker. And this check is simply in the interest of the capitalists to keep us in our houses, to keep us somewhat little bit fed, so we're ready to go back to work when they need us. Also, in the current period, in the last week, there has been people are out of work. People are suffering. I think it was 1/5 of American workers are either been fired, unemployed, or under hours. And there's been a movement across the country to demand that the economy open back up, even though if the economy is open up, it will create thousands of deaths. 1/3, good point by KJ Mack. 1/3 haven't been able to pay their rent. So people are suffering. You got reactionary forces like Glenn Beck out here saying we need to sacrifice the old people to get the economy running, to open up the economy running. So you got workers convinced in a bad situation, turned instead of turning to us, the revolutionary trend, and organizing unemployed councilments, they're out demanding that we go back to work. This is bullcrap that happens when we don't have a mass communist movement. Forces are appealed to reactionaryism. They're calling for the death of their elderly neighbors so they can maybe keep their rent going or maybe feed their families, pinning one section of the working class against another section. Here in North Carolina, I think some folks got arrested out of the Capitol. They don't, and Trump has encouraged this. I saw Caleb Maupin had a tweet about how Trump doesn't want to lose his base. Like, he's in a very precarious political situation with his mishandling of it, and he doesn't want to go against his base, even though he probably should tell him not to do these things. He's encouraging it to keep that political power in base with malice and an uncaringness of the elderly, the working class elderly. We need to go out, honestly. Folks in the working class community, you got a friend or you know somebody, go to them and be like, hey, man, grandma over there is going to die if you keep this shit up. Wash your hands. Don't be out there with them dumbasses that want grandma to die. All right. Another thing I'm going to go into, Warren ended up back in bourgeois, getting into the scheme, the drama of bourgeois politics. Elizabeth Warren, which was kind of like a faux progressive. The Black Agenda Report, I recommend, did an article on her. She wants green bombs, not a Green New Deal. As much as I dislike Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren was obviously worse. But I noticed in some of the petty bourgeois movement circles, people that were a little scared of what Bernie was saying ended up backing Warren. And she's just another sheepdog, just like Bernie. They're just, her backing Bernie is to show any of these folks in their parties, apart from insurgent, localized, principal candidates, which ones I have supported, like Fahim Hanna in Greensboro, who goes out and has a community farm, picks up trash in the community. I'm not talking about the insurgency folks on the local level within the Democratic Party. I ain't talking about it. I'm talking on a national level. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, their sole goal is to be a sheepdog, act like an animal, get familiar with a sheep, and lead them to the slaughter. That's Bernie Sanders. That's Elizabeth Warren. All right, so in conclusion, read and study scientific socialism. This book right here, best, most consistent, down to earth language. J.V. Stalin's The Foundations of Leninism, Wage, Labor, and Capital. Maybe Olgin's Why Communism. Read, understand theory. That's a big part. Another part of it is organization, efficiency, on the ground, getting out there, organize unemployment councils, mutual aid, help feed your neighbors, ask the folks around you, elderly folks, if they need anything. You know, on the ground, it's just as Stalin talked about American efficiency and Lenin revolutionary sweep. We need both now in this times of crisis. Studying of Marxism, and also on the ground efforts, like the new African Black Panther Party is doing in Jersey, stuff like that. And from this struggle, both mass organization and through revolutionary understanding, we can transform our society into a society based on the needs of the working class and not the profits of the capitalism. We can invest in our future and invest and build things forward. We can benefit from automation. We can have the same standard of living and work less and develop socialism and eventually communism. To be fair, to encourage people to participate. At this point, I'm gonna read the comments. NJ Mack, even a Marxist hypothetically became president of the United States, they wouldn't be able to do much and would be constantly sabotaged by both sides. Yes, even Bernie Sanders mentioned that it was a revolution. It was this, just like Franklin Delano Roosevelt was pushed by a mass communist party to achieve the little things that we do have. Absolutely correct. Daryl Mitchell, thank you. Sheepdog is the troop. Yep, love Engels. Everything's Engels 2020. KJ Mack, hey, I seem to be the odd one out in Marxist circles in that I prefer digital books over physical books. I've got USB sticks full instead of. I think that's an age thing, KJ Mack. I saw a beautiful picture of propaganda from North Korea where it showed 3 images. It showed an older man with a book, and it showed a middle-aged man with a laptop, and it showed a young girl on a tablet, and it talked about same revolutionary methods, new message of reading it. I still prefer physical books for reading. I have trouble looking at a screen for a long time. I can do quick bursts of social media, but I prefer physical books. And I spend a lot of time reading. I mean, I spend a lot of time driving as a truck driver, and I love audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks is really like even articles. This is what I do when I'm driving my truck. Articles that I can't sit down and read, I will put into text-to-speech programs, like articles from Black Agenda Report and others, City Sheehan. I will stick those articles in text-to-speech programs, and I will have that program read me a playlist of those articles as I'm driving. And that really helps me. And that's part of the reason why I'm dictating J.V. Stalin's Foundations of Leninism, to make that as a resource to other folks who prefer listening to books. All right. So that was my conclusion. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Read, study, organize. All power to the people. Thank you.